My dear friends, we have some unfinished business. Today we are returning to Maul Shadow Lord. Oh yes, I assume by now we've all seen the 2-episode finale, and what an incredible finale it was. But today I want to address some lingering questions which I've seen a lot of fans bring up. Others are questions which I noted on my second rewatch, and I figured it would be fun to address them. So we're going to begin with You Know Who, the surprise which took us all aback. Now, the other day there was a Maul Shadow Lord finale event where Dave Filoni spoke about the mental differences between Vader's outlook on life and Maul's outlook on life. It's a pretty fascinating quote which I want to return to later in the video, but first, I want to talk about why this confrontation was so important, and notably what was going through each of their heads. What was Darth Vader thinking, because he doesn't say a single word, and what was Maul thinking? At face value, you might think it's a pretty easy thing to work out, but there's a lot of context given to us in sources like The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire, a couple of notable comics, and even the Clone Wars Season 7. So let's dive into it. Both of these characters have one figure in their lives in common: Darth Sidious. Maul was once Palpatine's apprentice, whereas Darth Vader is Palpatine's current apprentice. And while this is the first time they've really confronted each other like this, their history goes back to the Phantom Menace. Vader remembers Maul as the person who killed his original master, and someone who nearly ran over him on Tatooine at the age of 10.
Anakin, drop!
And after Maul murdered Qui-Gon on Naboo, Anakin pledged that if he ever got the chance, he would get his revenge. Obviously, as Anakin, that never happened, and now that he's turned to the dark side, he's killing Maul for a very different reason. He's doing it on behalf of Darth Sidious. But now we have to look at things from Maul's perspective. This is where things get really interesting, because you might have noticed that at first, Maul didn't recognize Vader. And this actually makes a lot of sense, but the reason that some fans are confused about this is because in the Clone Wars' final season, Maul knows all about Anakin's importance. He knows all about why Sidious needs him, the grand plan, and how dangerous he's going to be as a Sith. So the question is, why when Vader arrives, does Maul not sense him at first? The answer is more complex than you might think, and it's threefold. The first is pretty obvious. Maul doesn't know that Anakin became a cyborg after his fight with Obi-Wan. Maul had very vague visions about Vader, but they weren't specific enough to make out that Anakin was going to lose his limbs and be put in a suit. Second of all, Maul might have known a lot about the Sith plan, but he didn't know who Anakin was when he first came across him all of those years ago. And lastly, think of the situation Maul just found himself in. He had just been fighting Inquisitors, helmeted warriors of the Empire who conceal their identities. So it stands to reason that at first, Maul must have thought he was fighting an Inquisitor Supreme, that Vader was like the final boss of Inquisitors, sent by Sidious himself. So those are the surface level answers. At this point in the timeline, but even further on, Vader is something of Sidious's secret. He's not well known throughout the galaxy. In fact, at this point, Vader served two very specific purposes. The first was to retrieve Sith artifacts from across the galaxy to further the power of the Sith, and the second was to oversee and train the Inquisitors. But more than this, Vader served as Palpatine's enforcer. Within Imperial ranks, he was something of a legend, someone who was believed to be a myth by many, who was largely unseen. But there was always the threat if you didn't follow through on your orders, Vader was someone you would have to face. And word quickly spread throughout Imperial ranks that Vader meant death. If you got into enough trouble, then Vader was the last person you'd want to see, but in many cases, he'd be the last person you'd ever see.
Apology accepted, Captain Nida.
But as an authority figure, and the second Sith in the lineage of the Rule of Two, he was someone very much operating from the shadows. So when he lands on a planet like Janix, it's no wonder Maul assumed he was probably just another Inquisitor. The Inquisitorius had a much more prominent public presence. Generally speaking, Janix is a really poor example because they hadn't succumbed to the Empire's control until this very show. But for Maul, he mentions that he's come across Jedi Hunters in the past. But when he crosses blades with Vader, it becomes obvious that this is no Inquisitor, and those are Maul's own words. This is someone far more powerful, and it's actually Master Iko Diodaki who first senses that this is a Dark Lord of the Sith. And I wonder if he knew Anakin back in the day. I wonder if he came across him in the hallways of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. So back to Maul's realization. In the scene where Devon is torn between two ideologies, Maul finally has the realization that this helmeted menace is Sidious's new apprentice. And notice he whispers under his breath, "No, no, no, it can't be." A couple of people I've spoken to seem to have missed this. It's the moments that Maul realizes if he's gonna hit Sidious where it hurts, Vader is the threat he's gonna have to snuff out. He's not powerful enough, and even though there's gonna be a rematch in Season 2, by the time of Rebels, he's still not strong enough. Vader is immensely more powerful. Even if Maul is a seasoned duelist at this point, years following the last time he used the title of Darth, Vader could pretty much beat him any day of the week. Now at the end of the finale, when Devon agrees to become Maul's apprentice, they're setting up that Maul is going to train her in Season 2, and I reckon he's going to try and learn as much as he can about Vader. But the rise and fall of the Galactic Empire says attempting to learn about him is nearly impossible. Why? Allow me to read you the quote. Vader might be infamous, but how much do we actually know about him? How much do we fully understand how he serves? He doesn't fit into Palpatine's Imperial hierarchy. Even Imperials who knew him by name didn't fully understand his purpose or true power, unless they were unfortunate enough to feel his wrath. But Maul has an advantage. He was a Sith apprentice who survived and knows more about Palpatine's plan than most. Maul is surprisingly good at connecting the dots. But as promised, my friends, Dave Filoni has chimed in, and here's what he said. The challenge with using Darth Vader is to show Maul the horrors of what you can become when power and evil come together in a more perfected version than what Maul is, which is a broken, scrambling version of evil. And Filoni notes, there is no question in his mind that Vader will always be able to best him. Maul is doomed to fail. Maul is Sisyphus. Vader, Dave Filoni says, is more powerful, more destructive, and more of a weapon for the Emperor, which, to Maul, is a problem. And one decision Filoni says was very important for him when bringing Vader into this show is to make sure he had no dialogue, saying this: "There's no new information we need. We just need him to be a powerful, destructive force." Vader, through his presence, through his ability, through his terror, shows those aspects without needing to say a single word. And the head writer, Matt Miknevets, further confirms that Maul was able to figure out who Vader was through deductive reasoning, saying this: "This is obviously not an Inquisitor, so it must be the apprentice. It certainly doesn't look like Anakin, but if it is who I think it is, it's a Jedi that's been transformed into something dangerous. It knows the ways of the Jedi, and it knows the ways of the Sith. But more than anything, it knows how you think."